To understand the music of Richard Wagner, you have to understand the man, and to understand the man, you have to look at how he viewed his own life. In the first volume of his autobiography, My Life, Wagner doesn't just give us a timeline of dates and premieres, he gives us a portrait of a man who felt every professional setback as a personal insult and every artistic triumph as a cosmic event. It is a story that begins in the quiet, structured world of Leipzig in 1813 and moves through the chaotic, blood-stained streets of the 1848 revolutions. Wagner's story starts with a sense of being shaped by the stage. His childhood was deeply tied to the theatre, largely because of his stepfather, Ludwig Geyer. Geyer wasn't just a father figure, he was a man who helped shape Richard's early understanding of the world through the lens of performance and drama. By the time Wagner was a young man, he was already finding his way into the professional world, starting as a professional conductor in places like Magdeburg. At this stage, he wasn't the legendary figure we know today. He was a working musician, struggling with what he called the demon of care, that heavy, grinding weight of professional responsibility and the constant, nagging pressure of artistic ambition. It's a tension that stays with him throughout the entire book. He wanted to be great, but he also had to make sure he could eat, and that his music was actually being played. During these early years, his personal life was just as turbulent as his professional one. He fell in love with a singer named Minna. Their relationship wasn't a smooth, romantic fairy tale. It was a messy, jealous, and often difficult courtship. There were moments of doubt and distance, but as the years passed, Minna became the steadying force he didn't know he needed. She transitioned from a source of romantic turmoil into a resilient partner who would eventually become his anchor when his world began to catch fire. As Wagner moved through different German cities like Riga and Dresden, his musical ambitions began to outgrow the small-town theatres that hired him. The directors wanted light, commercial music, the kind of stuff that kept the audience happy and the ticket sales steady. But Wagner was already looking towards something much larger and more serious. He was beginning to move away from the superficialities of the stage and toward the grand, sweeping dramas that would eventually define his legacy. This period of his life was marked by a sudden, almost overwhelming surge of success. The premiere of his opera, Rienzi in Dresden, was a turning point. It brought him immediate, international fame. He describes this moment as being almost surreal, like a dream where he was watching himself from the outside. But with that fame came a new kind of danger, the poisonous envy of the musical establishment. Suddenly, he wasn't just a conductor, he was a target. Critics and rivals, including figures like Mendelssohn, began to watch him with a scrutiny that felt more like hostility than professional critique. This success was a double-edged sword. While the world was starting to notice him, Wagner was also experiencing the deep, stinging humiliations of the professional music world. He talks about the struggle of trying to realize a grand vision, while being held hostage by the limitations of the people actually performing the work. He recounts a particularly painful moment during the production of Tannhäuser, where he was forced to cut musical passages to accommodate the ego and the vocal limitations of a star singer. For a man who viewed his music as a sacred, unchangeable truth, having to compromise his score for the sake of a performer's convenience was a profound wound to his artistic integrity. It was a lesson he learned early. A composer's vision is only as strong as the stagecraft and the people supporting it. However, he quickly realized that trying to reform the theatre from the inside was like trying to fix a sinking ship while the captain was actively working against you. The bureaucratic resistance he faced in the Saxon court led him to a radical conclusion. True artistic reform couldn't happen without a total social revolution. This political disillusionment coincided with a massive shift in his creative mind. He started moving away from historical dramas and towards something much deeper and more ancient. He began looking into the roots of German mythology, specifically the Nibelung legends. He was looking for a way to create art that felt primordial, something that tapped into the very soul of a people. This brings us to the climax of the first volume, and it is a period of intense, overlapping chaos. The 1848 revolutions hit Dresden with full force. Wagner found himself caught in the whirlwind of the May uprising. He wasn't just watching the violence from a distance, he was witnessing the literal burning of the opera house amidst the street fighting and the barricades. It was a moment where his art and his politics collided in a terrifying physical way. But while the city was burning, Wagner's personal life was also under siege. A coordinated smear campaign, orchestrated by his social and professional rivals, began to circulate rumors about his character. They painted him as an adulterer, attempting to dismantle his reputation and alienate him from the society he was trying to lead. This campaign worked. It created a massive rift with Minna and left him feeling isolated and hunted. The volume ends with Wagner in a state of retreat. He fled to the Swiss Alps, seeking refuge from both the political violence and the personal scandal. He was a man adrift, a revolutionary without a country and a composer without a home. But the ending of this first chapter isn't a tragedy, it's a moment of transition. While in Switzerland, he received a letter of support from Franz Liszt, a major figure in the musical world who validated his talent even in his darkest hour. More importantly, he received news of Minna's steadfastness. Despite the scandals and the distance, she was in Zurich, holding their life together and remaining loyal. This news changed everything for him. It gave him the emotional stability he needed to stop running. The volume closes with Wagner deciding to return to his life, not as a wandering revolutionary, but as a man ready to reclaim his professional standing and his domestic life. He was moving toward a period of stability, even if the path ahead was still fraught with the same tensions that had defined his youth. When we look back at this period of Wagner's life, a few major themes emerge that help explain why his music feels the way it does. First, there is the constant, exhausting struggle between artistic integrity and commercial necessity. He spent much of his early career fighting against the petty degradations of provincial theatre management. He wanted to create noble art, but he was constantly forced to deal with the reality of budgets, difficult singers, and the demands of a public that often didn't understand him. This struggle is baked into his music. The tension between the grand, epic scale of his visions and the practical constraints of the human performers who have to execute them. Then, there is the intersection of art and politics. Wagner's experience during the 1848 revolutions fundamentally changed the direction of his work. He realized that art cannot exist in a vacuum, separate from the social and political structures of the time. This realization pushed him away from the historical dramas of the past and toward the mythological foundations of identity. He wasn't just writing stories, he was trying to tap into something he believed was the collective unconscious of a nation. We also see what we might call the burden of genius. Wagner's autobiography is a deeply psychological look at the difficulty of translating an internal, almost spiritual vision into a physical, external reality. The frustration he felt when his music was cut, or when a stage production failed to meet his standards, wasn't just professional annoyance, it was an existential crisis. He felt that if the music wasn't perfect, the vision was lost. By the end of Volume 1, we see a man who has been stripped of his illusions. He has seen the violence of revolution, the cruelty of social scandal, and the limitations of the human voice. But he has also found a sense of purpose. He is no longer just a boy from Leipzig or a provincial conductor. He is a man who has survived the fire and is ready to build something much larger from the ashes. He is moving toward the era of the great music dramas, a journey that will change the course of Western music forever.